Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m., Wednesday, the 12th of February, and you are watching episode 159 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, the building of Colosseums and the fall of governments, is my guest, Graeme Haycroft. Graeme is the founder and chairman of the Red Union Support Hub. Prior to retiring in 2012, he was the principal of Labour Hire International Limited, a successful labour hire business employing the style of business that engaged over 2,000 people and was turning over $100 million annually. With time on his hands, he was approached to set up a new independent nurses union. Starting from scratch, he devised a new mechanism which applied the technical, administrative, and legal service for a union, adhering to strict business practice and methods of creating a constitution that prohibited members' funds in any form being directed to any political party. The result was the founding of the Red Union. The model provides for the delivery of effective union services at half the cost to the members as traditional unions. From inception in 2014, the various Red Union entities, nurses, teachers, police, doctors, drivers, independent workers unions represent now nearly 22,000 members, and it's continuing to grow. Welcome, Graeme.
Pleased to be here, Bill. Pleased to be here.
Just moving through the conversation about building Colosseums and falls of government, sort of harks back to the days of the Romans, really. It was to distract people from poor governance. When things got bad at home, well, you had to entertain the plebs, as all the common people were called, because they were getting a bit unruly, especially if the bread queues were getting longer or something like that. So usually they had to have an distraction. One was, of course, sports, the gladiator sports. The other thing was picking a war with someone you could beat, more than likely, that just changed the focus of the population. And it's the same thing these days. We seem to be distracted all over the place. Up in Cairns, we've got things going on, continually talking about things like Barlow Park, where they play rugby league games. Sometimes they get a NRL match up here, but mostly it's just general. So it's only used sporadically, but they've just announced they're going to pump $91 million into it to sort of upgrade it. But like I say, things like that are just putting lipstick on a pig, and a distraction. And it's the same thing with the Albanese government finding $600 million, to give to Papua New Guinea for a rugby union team. So it's a common sort of ploy, but now we've got a situation. We've just elected a new government for Queensland back in October. Their first 100 days are up. Of course, they've got all the usual excuses. We didn't know the books were so bad. But the other gift they've been given by the Labor Party as a parting present was the problem with the Olympic Games. Now, that was sort of touted for back in 2019, I think. It was announced years ago that we were successful, and we're basically 3 years on, and there's nothing more than probably a sketch on a napkin as to where we're going with this. So that's like, is that like a poison chalice given over to the LNP if it doesn't manage it properly?
It is a poison chalice, and I think the LNP are sleepwalking into a complete trap. I've lost track of the number of billions of dollars that's involved in the build, which as I understand, hasn't started yet. And the big problem with this is that there's a time frame. and it all has to be completed by 2032. But more importantly, there's a time frame coming up in 2027 whereby the people in Queensland will be having a look at the government and saying, now, is this build on time and on schedule, and is it likely to happen? And my view is that unless the LNP is prepared to address the three monopolies in the construction industry, it's not one, there's three of them, and if they leave the CFMEU, which is just an arm of the ALP, in charge of the scheduling of the build, I think it won't be very hard for the CFMEU slash ALP to basically bug around the sites so that the build is in jeopardy, still doable, but not going very successfully. And then one of the key election issues next election is going to be we've got the pride of Queensland and the Olympics are going to happen, and it looks like the LNP government can't deliver. And I think they're being set up for that. And I don't think they can see it. And that's why I've written a sort of a paper on this, and to basically spell out so that people understand how the construction industry works, what a rort it is, who's making the money, and how do you fix it? So they're the questions. Do you want me to
I
talk
think
about?
most people there's a general understanding that infrastructure build and large commercial builds like the Star Complex and all those sort of things in commercial terms, any high rises, then every bit of government infrastructure costs us in Australia much more than it does in other first world countries. Somewhere, I mean, the general bandied figure is somewhere in the region of 40 to 50% is, could be removed if, working, changes happened in that. So is that your sort of evaluation as into the cost? Because you were involved in some buildings of substantial buildings.
Yeah.
Um,
The 40-50% number was around 30 years ago, probably a bit lower. They do it so the Housing Industry Association said at least 30% then. And this was before the CFMEU really got going. I mean, the construction industry wrought, and I'll call it, everyone's making money except the taxpayers and the LNP. And I would also argue that the vast majority of the construction workers aren't making as much money as they could under a different system. So you've got this extraordinary thing. And what causes I think the probably number is probably closer to double now, because there's just no everybody's on the gravy train. And here's the problem. When you have to, and you've got, let's say you got $100 billion spent. I'm just making that number. I don't know what it really is. Let's say it's 100 billion. All these numbers are telephone numbers, aren't they? And there's you've got a time frame. It has to be done by a certain date. Otherwise, the Olympics are off. How much is the government going to be prepared to pay to complete that work?
Anything.
Anything.
Anything it can borrow.
It could be anything. It could be 5 times 10. I doubt if we'd ever get to 10 times, but there could be 5 times. And this is the problem the LNP face. They have a second problem. It can be addressed. I'll talk about, if you like, about the 3 monopolies in the construction industry. The first one is the monopoly of the unions. The CFMEU is the only union which has all of the powers as a registered union to do whatever, to represent its members. It's the same monopoly that the Queensland Nurse and Midwifery Union have got. And Queensland Health is a function of the QNMU, I call them that. It's a function of their system. They run the show. And unless their monopoly, I mean, we're 20% of all the nurses, and we are actually, our members are actually equally represented because we get around it. I'm a director of a law firm, and so we can provide exactly the same services as a registered union. My argument is that we're okay. We're big enough to be able to set up our own law firm, right? We've got 22,000 members, 8 or 9 million turnover a year, and we have 30 people. But there's no why shouldn't the nurses at Cairns get together and say we want to form a Cairns nurses union just for the hospitals around Cairns, and we'd like to negotiate with the management of Cairns Hospital. Why not? Why shouldn't they be allowed to do that? So at this stage, they can't do it. If they could, that would change everything, because the replacement of a monopoly isn't just one thing. Sorry, isn't just you have two. You don't go from 1 to 2, you go from 1 to 22, right? Look at every other monopoly that's been taken away everywhere else in the world in whatever field. You don't just get another one, you get streams and streams of different competition. The market becomes quite open. So the point I'm leading to is that if the LNP does not address this union monopoly and basically allow any group of workers and any union to have exactly the same powers as ordinary unions, then Queensland Health will be unfixable. And you reckon it's bad now? You wait to see what happens when 40,000 bureaucrats and all of this, and that's mainly the staff in Queensland Health, who hate the LNP, right? We've had to deal with them for the last 4 or 6 years, and they have covered up everything. I tell you what, they won't be covering stuff up now. They'll be making sure everybody's story gets out, and the collapse of the Queensland Health system will be there for everyone to see, and the government won't be able to address it properly as long as if they leave the QNMU in places the way they are. So they're toast. They're toast in 2028 on those two issues alone. So, I thought, well, now's the time to address it. I understand what the problem in the construction industry is. There's 3 monopolies. You want me to talk about the 3?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, the first monopoly is the CFMEU. It's the only registered union, and we've got a little Independent Workers Union of Australia, which has got probably less than 1,000 members. A lot of them ex-CFMEU people over the mandates issue. The reason there's nowhere else for the for the CFMEU construction workers to go. There's 20,000 of them in Queensland. Probably 1,000 of them are rat bags. Bill? We see them marching and they're all thugs and carry on, drug addled, whatever term you want to use. They're rat bags. The other 19,000 are solid as a rock. They're family people. They've got mortgages. They're skilled tradespeople. They just want to get on with the job. They don't like the CFMEU. Most of them don't even vote for the Labor Party. They're making 250 grand a year. My argument is if they were freed up, it'd probably make 300,000 because there's such a desperate shortage of these guys, and they will want to work. So there's your first monopoly. You've got to change and allow anyone else, any other group of workers, to form their own union. And the logical thing
just on that, that's really only can be done with. It can just be a matter of state legislation to do that.
Yeah,
it's not some complex. I have to go get a referendum or go to the feds or something like that.
Exactly.
So and the thing about Queensland, we're only a one-house parliament. So if you've got the majority, you can basically do anything you want. So
they can do
now the times to do everything you need to be done and be shown that you've improved things.
Yeah, it's not hard to do because the change is simple, but it's not easy because everyone's making a quid out of the existing system, except the LNP, and accept the taxpayers. Right? Everyone else is making it quit. Let's go on to the construction industry is really, really bad because there's two other monopolies. See, the CFMEU, the construction workers have to be in the CFMEU. It's a mandatory condition of getting onto any site. And this has been coordinated by, they won't say this, of course, but coordinated by the Master Builders Association, who've got every construction firm or major one, doing commercial work to make it a condition of entry onto a site that everyone has to be in the CFMEU. So even if there was an alternate union for the CFMEU workers to join, they still can't get a job because at this stage, the second monopoly, every construction firm, because of the Master Builders Association, who made it a condition, and the Master Builders Association are in commercial partnership with the CFMEU. And there's nothing wrong with that. They've got the bus superannuation fund, they've got the redundancy fund, and there's 3 or 4 other commercial businesses that they run with the CFMEU. They're not the, enemy that they make them out to be. So the workers are in the CFMEU because of the monopoly that is really coordinated by the Master Builders Association. The third monopoly is there are only 4 firms, construction firms, that can tender for the large work. Bill, it's not a monopoly, but it's not far away, is it? It's called an oligopoly. And you effectively have a form of collusive tendering. Now, I've got to qualify that collusive because it's normally regarded as an illegal thing. Now, the tendering is not illegal at all. It's just the raft of regulations about who can do what and effectively means that only 4 of them can tender. One of the crazy conditions is the firms have to have, I think, 500 million public liability cover. Who's ever heard of a $500 million claim anywhere in the world on a construction site that was provable back? But that's one of the little things. There's probably another 100 things, all of which add up to make it very difficult for other smaller and more efficient organisations to tender. Each one of those monopolies has to be addressed. There's no simple solution. Everybody in the construction industry is opposed to the change because they're all making a quid out of it. That's the problem.
And that's not only for government type work. It also impacts on private investment, usually in big projects that have got the blessing of the government.
Yeah, look, it's the government can only really influence its own work. The government can fix it quite easily. It just simply says, Campbell Newman wanted to end it, and the LNP government introduced a building code, which I helped draft, right, which just set out the things that a construction company wasn't allowed to do, all the stuff that actually restricted choice and put up the price of tendering. All that stuff you just write down and say, well, that's banned. You can't do that. If you do want to do it, you can't tender. So the penalty isn't, we'll have a, naughty bureaucrats. Now, the penalty is only one penalty. You breach the building code, you can't tender until you stop breaching it. That's the power of the checkbook, Bill. That's how you do it. That's how you stop it. It's that simple. And, having only 4 tenderers, that could be stopped by the minister tomorrow and say, well, I don't care, there's going to be 10. And just get the bloody bureaucrats to change the rules so there can be 10 or it can be 20. Doesn't matter. There still needs to be some sort of winnowing to make sure that the people who are attending have the capacity to do the job. That's handled around the world in a number of different ways fairly efficiently. There's no perfect bloody solution to that. But restricting it to 4, all of whom get the double tender about double, he sure as hell ain't going to help anybody. So they're the 3 things that need to be done. So once you've done that, you're not going to you'll have 19,000 members construction workers will leave, and I think that they would logically join, and I would certainly help them do it. But set up, you know, if you feel like enterprise unions. In other words, all the workers on. I'll just an example. You know, one of the four is Hutchison Builders. You know, there's no criticism of Hutchison there. They're good. Scotty Hutchison's a good guy, and I'll just use that. You know, there's no reason why Hutchison's can't say, well, we'll set up, let the boys form their own, enterprise union, which will be exactly equal to the CFMEU. Guess which one they'd probably join? Especially if it'd be quarter of the price. You don't need $2,000. You know, anything they would need done, you could, we'd even service it for $500 would be plenty. So that's how you change it. And you get McNabb's as another one. I don't know the names of the other two, but and there's other medium-sized builders that do a lot of work. They might say, well, I'll just have all the guys that do my work to join a union, and I'm happy to negotiate with them and make sure they get a good deal. That's how you break the union monopoly. And of that $2,000 that's paid to every CFME, to the CFMEU from every construction worker, there's 20,000 by 2,000, that's $40 million, Bill. About 1,500 of that doesn't get used. Probably more than 1,500 of it doesn't get used. That's available for the ALP. So you've got around about 100 people or so in the CFMEU who only work on ALP projects. Now it's very inefficient, but that's how the money gets across. It doesn't actually get across. The people in the unions do the work of the ALP. Same with the nurses, same with the teachers. 100 million a year, Bill.
Yeah, the other thing is too, there's a general perception by the community for some reason that if you don't have unions, or something like the CFMU out there fighting for the workers, they'll get less paid. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's plenty of organisations that don't have big, strong unions and still get paid, well, and they're paid for their capability. So just because you don't have the CFMEU representing doesn't mean you're going to get paid less.
It's all the other crap that goes with the conditions. I mean, the workers, they've all got to be master-servant relationship, which is a very inappropriate and inefficient way to organise any form of work. We've all fallen for the LNP don't understand that contracting is actually better for people, and they've never properly defended it. But the housing industry is entirely like 100% contracting, and those guys do okay. But the commercial, there is a shortage of the commercial construction workers. They only work a 9-day fortnight. How many hours they work a day? They'd be scratching to do bloody more than 7.5, wouldn't they? Well, they start at 7 and knock off about 2:30 or something, whatever.
Toolbox meeting.
So these guys, they're bloody professionals. They start at 7 and they'll knock off at 4. And if they need to stay there and do it, they'll do another hour. And if you're paying them on, you can then sort of work out, right, you guys, you do this here and you complete this at such and such a time. There's the bonus. Poof. You can't do that under the CFMEU rules. I would reckon that the construction workers wouldn't be able to do the bloody sums unless they'd probably get 25% more. They might have to do a bit of extra work, but 25, 30% more. Not bad money if you can get it.
But there's a lot of productivity gains to be had. I don't believe a competent tradesman needs to have a 15-minute talk every day before he goes on the site. He gets to the site, they have a toolbox. He doesn't need that. They would probably be happy just to get in, get to work, and then get now that they've cut out that toolbox. Well, it's now productivity, and there's a productivity gain benefit for the job.
Look, I remember 30 years ago, but we did probably dozen construction sites on the Sunshine Coast. 2 of them were in Brisbane, I remember. Um, and what happened? The only reason we stopped doing it is their principal contractor, who we were supplying the labour to, and he was really running the sites, well named Ronnie Jenkins. Ronnie made enough money in the 2 and a bit years to retire, right? Because he was costing out the formwork on the basis it would say take 6 months. In actual fact, when you got the CFMEU and the Master Builders Association rules off the site, it knocked the job over in 4 months, right? I was at a business. I was supplying the labour to Ronnie, and we organised all the conditions and monitored the sites. So we were only getting 4 months worth of wages, but it didn't matter. The guys went on to another bloody job, but Ronnie made a fortune. And all the projects were successful because, okay, you got a crane hire for 6 months, but you only need it for four. The financing was for 6 months, but you only needed it for four. That's where the savings came in. Every one of our projects made the guys who were doing it, the developers, made a serious quid, and the workers did well too. So
I think,
that's the difference.
yeah. I think one of the things since I've been up here in Cairns, we've had the Crystal Brook collection built
Yep.
by Gus and Abood. Now that was three different sites. Riley's up on the Esplanade. That was a refurbish of the old building plus the new tower. Then there was the Baileys, and that was a Greenfield site. And then there was the old hotel on the Esplanade that I can't remember what name that had. But I'd never remembered anything about it, any disputes. And the work was done by Prime out of Cairns. I think they're up towards the end of towards the airport way.
Yep.
Um, they Everything was on schedule, ahead of time, costs were all right, and they were all delivered, without really any hoo-ha of that. And the same period, we had that stupid extension done to the exhibition centre. That started off, it was going to be about $100 million, and I think it turned out and done in about 2 years. I think it ended up hitting somewhere towards the $200 million. It took, I think, really a lot of people reckon it isn't finished because it's got a tin roof basically, and there's no real undercover, under noise prevention. They reckon when it rains, it makes a hell of a din.
Oh
So
dear
they
me.
reckon they got shortchanged, and it took about 4 years. And the other thing that sort of really got up people's nose in Cairns is that all the air conditioning was done by Melbourne, where we had people here who could, do all the stuff. There were so many, people come up to do the job. Because it's a government job, it's also got one of those major contractors, and they seem to just bring in a lot of, interstate and Brisbane workers rather than, really use the local workforce.
Yep.
So that's also a problem for regional Australia in regards to getting benefits out of government infrastructure build.
If there's government work going on, and we have to accept, uh, if there's going to be graft bill, then you don't want your local workers and your local firms getting the work because everybody in town will know. But if the work's coming in from a long way away, then who knows what they bid? You know, that game's as old as, well, it's probably the third profession, isn't it? There's the finding a way to slip around the government bloody rules.
One
Now,
one of the
that's how they do it.
one of the other things that sort of is around too is that governments, that when you get to a certain expenditure, well, then it comes under major project, and then it goes to the situation where it has to be one of these big tenderers sort of thing.
That's right.
And I remember just after the GFC, and Rudd came up with his school canteens and shade cloth areas and stuff like that. And I was in Ballarat at the time, Now, the Catholic schools, they did extremely well out of it because they managed their own money. They got they just didn't spend it on their little canteen or anything or designed by some government troll or something. They actually got big extensions to their school walls. But one of the things that happened in uh, Ballarat, although there wasn't a lot of big money for each school, what they did is combine the build for several schools, made it a capital cost that says, well, it's over $2 million or something like that. I can't
Yeah.
remember the figure. And therefore, you have to have certain people tender for it.
Yeah.
So is that the same sort of situation we're talking about here? This is how they stop smaller companies actually getting in, on this as well.
Well, firstly, if it's a large contractor, there will be automatic uh, ALP union membership for everybody. That's how the ALP make money out of it. And the thing that surprises me is why the LNP would let them do it, but they do. And that's a good mechanism, isn't it? You raft everything up, you create new, because it's bigger, it now needs actually more supervision and the tenderers and the suppliers come from a long way away, and who knows what the best tenderer was. And because one of the other great games in tendering, of course, is you put out the tender specs, which aren't always for the lowest price. It's ability to work with our Indigenous brothers, or taking care of cultural issues with so and so. Quite often the commercial tenders have got that sort of stuff in them, and who knows what that's valued at. That's a game as old as the hills. And I mean, the only way, in my view, that you stop that is that you have to have openness, and you need to make everything as local as possible. If everything's been supplied from 500 miles away, you don't know what's going on, but it's all coming most of it's coming out of the town. Yeah, people talk, everyone knows.
Yeah, the other thing is, oh, we're talking about Queensland, but obviously the other states have got their own problems there.
Yeah.
Um, is this sort of uniform across all the states, or has there been better situations in some states than others? Because in the past we've had the federal government being liberal for a good percentage of the time, and then if you look at New South Wales, it had also had a liberal government for a long time. Did they ever address any of that? Did they get anything better than what we got, or was it just they just inactive? They just or they're too shy to sort of address in industrial relations, because that was something back I found back in even the Howard days, that fair work and all that they had. They were constantly shot down, sort of thing, even though they had good policy.
Oh, look, the industrial relations is just not understood very well at all. It's institutional behaviour, and even behaviour in workplaces is a fascinating thing. And most of it's counterintuitive. It's quite different from what most people think. Most politicians don't understand it. They talk in terms of unions as they have no members, right? And the CFMEU are dreadful. Well, hang on a minute, you've got 20,000 bloody construction workers, 19,000 of whom we know are good guys, and a few chicks, they're good guys. And yet they will get branded as being as bad as the few hundred ratbags that are running it. And until it's sort of hard to explain. It's just people behave differently in institutional environments, and there's one of the reasons the ALP have been so successful. I reckon there's probably about 100 people in Australia who really understand institutional behaviour. I'm one of them, but I'm not at the top of the pile, I can tell you. The problem for the LNP is that of that 100, probably 90 of them have worked for the left and the ALP. Graeme Haycroft, he knows what he's talking about. And there's a few, my partner Jack is actually very good, Ben Thompson, who runs Employment Hero. The guys in bloody Tanda are pretty good too. I'm starting to run out of names. There's probably two or three others in Australia who really understand this stuff, and the rest of them are all in the ALP and on the left, running universities, mate. That's where the real institutional behaviour is organised. Boy, oh boy. They
But,
are bloody good at it, Bill. Bloody good. Better than me. But that's the problem. If you want to address it, you have to understand it first. And there's not
well,
too many of us that understand it and say, no, you don't do that, you don't do that, you do that. And in other words, there's certain things you need to do that you can do effectively. And if you do the wrong thing, you breach trust and the whole thing will just turn to shit, basically.
well, it sort of surprises me in one regards because obviously you would think that the people in the industry, as the builders and construction, they would also have a reasonable clue and also access to expertise in the legal fraternity and all those sort of things, who could provide good advice to the LNP or any side of politics that choose to sort of address the issue of the unions and the poor productivity. But why don't they manage to get this skill set on board and then also take notice of it, or get it down in writing and a policy sort of thing as a direction to go?
Um, there's a number of reasons I've thought about why don't they? Well, it's strange. They've no curiosity about it. There's 100 million a year going to the ALP from the unions. And, you should talk to all the LNP politicians and say, you understand how that happens? Explain to me how you think it happens. And they all go, oh, I don't know. I don't want to know. And there's just no curiosity about it. And I said, but there's $100 million. Don't you want to stop it? Oh, yeah, we should pass a law. What law? And they just, no idea. It's really sad,
Well,
really sad.
I do understand it as in regards to candidates. I don't understand it in regards to the executive and the machinery of the LNP, the Liberal Party, the Nationals, because should have a solid core of input around it. I mean, I'm not going to pick any names, but we've just had a number of LNP people elected in North and Central Queensland. We've gone from 11 ALP members out of 19 before the election.
Yeah.
Now we've got 14 LNP members of the 19 in Central and North Queensland. And I reckon I can get them and rattle them, and they're just an empty vessel. A number of them, they've got there. They talk. They get on the radio. They talk about doing this or that in regards to the storms and that we've had. But
Yeah.
as for any economic um, expertise or thoughts of that, there's nothing there. They don't even know how to rig a frigging budget. They don't even know how to find the Treasury revenue documentation. That's how brain dead they are, and I would suspect that would be the same for some ALP members in regards who have just got a ticket into being a candidate and then getting elected. Yes, there's a strong handful who have that inner circle knowledge and stuff like that, but the vast majority are just empty vessels.
Well, the ALP people, it's a simple compact. The unions appoint them. The ALP parliamentary wing is an arm of the political arm of the union movement. It's only the LNP politicians who believe that somehow they're separate. They're just an arm. The CFMU is the arm of the ALP, and the nurse union's arm of the ALP. So what happens is basically the unions put up the candidates, and the deal is do as you're told, and you get 200 grand a year and become famous and have fun, and but you just got to do what you're told, and they do. You try and cross the party line, and you're gone. The LNP don't have that. There's no sort of it's not. not on our design plan that we want to control LNP politicians. Although the argument grows every day, I might say. But there's no one. They're selected sort of by the party people, and they're all, don't get me wrong, they're all well-meaning people. But the number of, as you said, almost none of them have got any business experience. They've never had to meet a budget. And most of them, there's probably only a handful that would actually make more money outside of the parliament than inside the parliament. So when that happens, they get around about 200,000 a year plus, extra allowances of about 50. So they're 200 to 250,000. There's probably less than half a dozen that could make more than that outside of parliament. So the rest of the 90% of them, they're not going to jeopardise that income stream. It's just human nature. They're not bad people. It's just that this is the best job they're ever going to have. They don't want to do anything that's likely to risk it. Whereas people that can earn more outside, can say, no, this is wrong. I'm going to stand on this and do it. And if they get rolled and get kicked out, I don't care. Go make some more money somewhere else. That's, I remember when I first got involved in the political side of the LNP, a lot of farmers, right? They're small business people. These guys can make more money off their farms. They continued to farm actually when they were, politicians. But they could read balance sheets. They understand how dollars worked. And there are a lot of business people, retailers and all sorts of business people and accountants and, lawyers everywhere. But there are a lot of accountants in Parliament and the LNP. These people could make sensible decisions about, government expenditure. They're, it's very limited today. There's, as I said, there's barely half a dozen that could earn more outside. That doesn't necessarily make them better people, but that's it. Overall, there's a commercial pressure that most of them don't want to risk anything.
But they've got some experience in dealing with the books and things like that, and the risk of business and that. Whereas most of the people, even from the LNP and Labor, most of the political students joined the party, either worked in the office of some politician or the union somewhere, and then gradually made their way out. But they've never really been involved in business and never been outside that bubble.
Yes.
So that's a problem. But we mentioned when you started, you mentioned three areas. We've talked about the unions and the big constructors. What's another area of the problem we've got with the monopolisation within the big construction industries?
Well, there's three monopolies. The real problem is that you've only got four major tenderers for major works. There's no reason that's got to change, and it's just a matter of going through and just removing all the regulations. The minister's saying we will have, there's a number of mechanisms. One mechanism is they could split jobs up. And so here's the tender for one stand in the stadium. Right, there's another tender for another stand, and so I'm not suggesting that's the best way to do it, but you could break the jobs up, and you can clearly define what's what, and then your smaller builders get in and become, they're more efficient generally, all right, and that's where you start to get the saving because you'll have real competition. Right? Before there's no competition.
I've seen that in Victoria actually. There used to be a roadworks company called Standard Roads.
Yep.
And they weren't overly big, but they did get a number of infrastructure jobs. And anyway, eventually what they did, they managed to get themselves in a position and they won the tender for what we call the Dandenong bypass, which was to take a run off of the Monash Freeway and send it down out on the outskirts of Dandenong on the east side of Dandenong around and hook up with the Highway 1 going down to Berwick. Now, they came in 12 months early and millions of dollars under budget.
Yep.
So you would think, well, there's a group that's going to get more work. Well,
No,
guess what happened?
doesn't work that way.
They got bought up, and
Oh,
the people who ran it were basically dispersed across whoever bought them up, and we were stuck with a new company, and it was inefficient. So that one model sort of thing that was going to deliver value for money for the taxpayers and had demonstrated was a target straight away to be devolved.
yeah. Look, you see it even at a lower level. Going back to the old labour hire days, I remember we picked up a contract to we had to provide some road workers who were doing road work stuff in the area. That was sort of it, and we did it. And the original tender stuff was just totally wrong. I mean, the amount of night work was just was like actually about 80 or 90% night work, because most road work on those, it's got to be done at night. But the tender specs at the beginning sort of said, I'll be 50-50. It's all bullshit. Anyway, what was interesting was that the tender came up again, and we said, well, it's not 50-50, it's 80 to 90-10. That's what you're asking for is not what's going to happen. So we said, you can't do it at that. You have to cost in the extra cost of, because 80% of it needs to be done at night. So what happened is we said, well, you can say this is what we'd have to charge to do it, right? Because we know it's going to be 80% at night. Some bloody firm came in and gave a much lower tender on the basis, because they believed the 50-50 bullshit. Anyway, they lasted about 4 months, I think, 4 or 5 months, and they folded. And then the department gave the contract to a guy who formerly had been in the department. Classic, absolutely. And of course, all at bloody cost plus, So there was no account taken of the previous work history. It was just every new contract started from scratch. The past experience had nothing to do with anything. And I thought, that was a good lesson. That's why that was the last government job I did, I can tell you. There's no way. But that's how most of it is. It hasn't changed much, I believe.
Just getting back to the Olympics, we're now less than 8, we're 7.5 years away. Allowing would have to test the sites. You'd think they'd want to be finished by 6 months before to get out all the teething problems. So we've probably got less than 7 years. It's another still 3.5 years away from the 28 election. And we seem to be up against a situation where there's just a whole series of proposals. There's some riverfront proposal by a private consortium. There's talk about the Gabba. There's talk about Victoria Park. There's talk about this having a multitude of different sites. And then obviously you got the other things that are tied to with it, supposedly transport mechanisms that have got to be improved. Where can the LNP make some decisive decisions that at least gives them a chance that something is on track before the 28 election, that at least gives them a half a chance to, get over the line, or that not to be a big anchor on the things. So what would you propose gets done? Say they've had their 100 days. Well, in the next 100 days, what have they got to do to get themselves into a position where they look like they've got control of this situation?
Well, here's the problem. If the CFMEU are still largely the same as what they are now, it doesn't matter what they do. It's not going to work, because the CFMEU will then be in charge of the schedule. It doesn't matter whether they expand the Gabba or build a Victoria Park. If you're leaving the controlling of the schedule to the ALP, because the CFMEU and the ALP are the same, and they don't care. They don't care. They'll just nobble the bloody work, so that six to 12 months out before the next election, they'll be arguing that the site's never going to get finished with the LNP because only the ALP can work with the CFMEU, and that'll become a big election issue. And
Well,
if the LNP gets into a situation where you're leaving a political enemy to set the schedule on the work that you have to get done, there was Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result, that's a good definition of insanity. Expecting to do the same thing over again has been done for 50 years, with one little exception in the 1990s. It's insane. It's just crazy. They've got to bite the bullet, not be brave. They have to be smart. Not hard to fix, but they have to be smart. They have to understand that everybody's going to be upset with them, but they'll get the job.
But what you said just before is the ultimate warning is, well, only the ALP can get the CFMEU to deliver on time and sort of, maybe half a budget. So that in itself speaks volumes to the LNP. Get something done about the CFMEU and its control over the situation. I mean, if they got a mouth, if that's Labor's got a mouth that, well, we're the only ones who can work with the CFMEU, well, then the Liberals have to turn around and say, well, obviously we can't, so we've got to have someone else to work with to go through this.
There's three monopolies, and the state government has absolute power to address all three. I wouldn't suggest that they do it in a day, because there's particularly the last one's going to take a fair bit of bloody homework, serious homework, to make sure that, because it's not one little thing it's probably 100 things. Each one would have to be untangled, but they're all untangleable. The monopoly of the unions itself, that's just a simple bit of legislation. I mean, there's a couple of pages of rules in the industrial relations system which describes the process to form a new union. We just excise all those. And that's like it's a half a day job. And then you create a new set of rules. You'd largely just copy the New Zealand rules, and you'd have there's 30,000 incorporated associations in Queensland, the tennis clubs and all those things. There's 30,000 of them. The Office of Fair Trade does that. The minister should have nothing to do with it. There's no quality or virtue in a set of rules in a constitution. And you can't say, oh, these are the people who are going to be running it. It's bullshit. It's just a set of rules. And you want to let anyone run them, as long as they run them legally. That's all. And just registration should be a tick and flick and take 1 week.
Yeah, so like it's incorporated association.
Exactly.
It's just a set of model rules, and then you have to abide by all these sections, depending on what you're doing. And then you can choose just to operate under that, with ticking those things off that you actually know that you've got to comply with them. Or you can use that same format and create your own constitution that sort of gives you your special objectives and things like that. It's not a big deal. I mean, even I operated 3 incorporated associations. You can do it in a day and pay your fees.
The same thing. You probably, look, I would think you wouldn't need much more than a page of extra legislation. The extra rules in the might need a couple of pages, because you're going to need to re-register all of the existing registered unions, right? You take them out of the Industrial Relations Commission and you bang them in Fair Trade or something else. Just you want to be not in the Industrial Relations Commission, and the rules would be simple, like the New Zealand legislation's like, just a tick and flick. I haven't read it all. It's probably only half dozen pages. You don't need much more than that. It's simple. It's a slightly different registered incorporated association bill. That's all it needs to be.
Well, the other thing is too, these days with the internet and the access, you can go and plagiarise anything you want. You can go and look at the constitution. If you're forming a new country or something, you go and look at half a dozen constitutions and write your own. If you're looking for legislation, you can go to any government side of any government in the world and look at most of the legislation and that on there, and pick and choose to suit. Like
Well,
it,
we'd make ours constitutions available. There's nothing. They're really simple. Anyone could use them. There's a we have a delegate system, members and delegate, uh, bit like the LNP and the ALP have got. But that you don't have to have that. That's just a method that you could almost use the standard constitution in incorporated constitution in Queensland. That
oh, I
probably
was talking about the actual legislation that the LNP will have
yeah.
to draft in that. You can go and
If
plagiarise
the
that.
point we're making, you could probably use the standard template for an incorporated association to run a union. Right? Probably you could almost do it. You probably only change a couple of things. So you don't need a lot of changes. It's just a matter the whole. It's currently a monopoly. All the registration processes are to make sure that no one else can register one. Right? That's what the process is. Not to help, it's to hinder, so that there can only be one. So if there's only one union bill, you can charge twice as much or three times as much as what you actually need. You know, we've got 22,000 members. We know it costs around about $400 a year to provide the service. I think we're charging 480 or 60 or something. The Q&A, but when you get to 40,000 members, you can probably do it not for 400, you can probably do it for 300, 350. Probably 300. Get to
Scales of economy.
60,000, you could do it for probably 200, 250. Let's have a look at 260,000. That's the membership of the QNMU, the nurse union. They charge $762 or something, but we know it costs 200 to 250 to run it. What happens to the other 500, Bill?
Oh, it goes into work for the ALP, but not cash. It's just labour providing
There's
services.
the QNMU got at least 100 people more, probably 150 people more than they actually need to do the job for the members. At least 100. Those 100 are full-time working on ALP projects, being paid for, from the union, and it's perfectly legal. I'm suggesting that should be changed, just as long as people are aware. As long as it doesn't matter, as long as there's a choice. The politicians have this view that, oh, we must fix that. Why would you want to fix something that's giving $500 a year to the ALP? Why would you want to fix it? You want to fuck it, wouldn't you?
If you're the LNP, you think you would.
Why would you want to fix it? For Christ's sake, let them keep doing it badly. Then your members will leave and join another one, and that means that this $500 doesn't go to your political opponent. That's the tricky bit that they have trouble with.
So, where do you find the willingness within the party to at least look, investigate, and maybe do something? I mean, there are some good people. There are, well, I have to phrase this because I haven't got much time for a lot of the LNP people from their track record. But at the moment, I have to give the benefit of the doubt to people like Stoker and that, who's now in the state parliament.
She's still there.
So there are some, I presume. So where do you find this cell or enough of the willingness group to actually take something like this forward, or does is it just going to be lost in the machinery?
Look, they're well-meaning, and most of them would want to do something, but the problem is because they're not curious, really. They don't understand it, and they cannot envisage what happens when the monopoly goes. Right? They think in terms of, oh, there'll be two. No, there's going to be 22, and that has no meaning to them. How would the employer be able to deal with them? I mean, and they're stuck in the mindset of that there's only one monopoly who's, because they've got a monopoly, are bad. But as I said before, in the nurse unions and the teacher unions, the first thing we would do, if you could, could set up a new union which was exactly equal to the existing ones, we'd just travel up the coast. I reckon we'd come back and have half a dozen set up. And some people just say, that's a good idea. We don't want anything to do with that bloody Haycroft and Maguire bastards. We'll do their own stuff. And I say, sure, there's our constitution. You can use it if you like. They'll
I
find it
think
a bit more difficult to bloody do than they think, but that's okay. We don't mind.
I think the other
Every member there is $500 that doesn't go to the ALP. That's the goal. Sorry,
but the other thing is I don't think what that they don't recognise is parochialism and people in an area banding together. So, and one of the things they don't like is being answerable to someone further up in some other area. So, you might have unions that are just created in a few of the major towns, like the nurses' unions might be a separate workers nurses' union in Mackay, or a construction union in Mackay as well. And then you go over to Townsville, there's another, because people will hive around their own area.
yes.
And it doesn't have to, as long as you write up your constitution, you can also look after industries that service the construction union, or even if with mining and that, if you've got a miners union, you can also include workers, affiliated workers from who are providing services to the mines and things like that. It doesn't have to be so rigid.
Well,
That
mining is glad you brought up mining. I mean, the mining division, the CFMEU was split, and the mining division is set up on their own. I'm not sure what they can call themselves. I don't have any memory.
it's the mining and energy union.
Okay, right. And that's there was a split of assets from the CFMEU, and I suspect, the CFMEU has gone into administration, which has a totally different meaning for a not-for-profit, right, than it does for a with-profit. The appointment of an administrator to look at what's happened is there's obviously some missing assets. My guess is, this is a guess, I've got no lead into this. Quite often in not-for-profits, you've got a different standard of auditing, if you like, than what you would have in a normal company. And it's particularly in the registered unions, a lot sloppier, and a lot of the stuff is done in arrears. Not saying it's crooked, but I reckon what happened, there were probably some assets, so maybe probably even 10 years ago, that are still on the books but probably aren't really there. And it never comes to account because no one ever goes and checks. They're still there. And when you do a split of the assets, everything gets looked at and say, well, where's that building that used to be is on the books? It doesn't seem to be there anymore. I'm not sure whether it was that or whatever. I reckon that's what it was. And oh shit, we better bury this. And of course they did. And good old Michaelia Cash came to the rescue. It's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, our Michaelia. The unions really needed the thing bogged down, in administration for at least 3 or 4 years, right? So what they did, they set it up and said, oh, we'll only need to be in administration for 12 months. And someone gave the tip to Piquet and said, oh, can't allow that. No, we can't allow that. So the LNP actually, moved the extension and passed the legislation to hold them to account even longer, which is exactly what they want. You can't make this stuff up. I'm sorry, Bill. You can't make it up. Michaelia's always there when they need her. Anyway, they're just the unions are just a lot smarter at this stuff. Anyway, so what we're talking about, did we get sidetracked from there? What was the question that we got sidetracked on? Where were we?
I was talking about the fact that there would be probably many unions, and there would also be a tendency to club around local areas.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's like, but is that sort of also something where the LNP could look at and say, all right, let's have the health department and hospitals control fractured a bit so it's more local, and then that would also enhance the idea of local unions around those centres that are run by the local health service and things like that.
Yeah, you're probably putting the cart before the horse there. The first thing you do is you allow the new union to be made, and it could take a whole week, Bill. You know, tick, 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 flick names, pay you, $100 fee, bang, stamp, done. That's it. And then when you've got that, that's when you then you get entrepreneurial types like us, like me, who knows that generally people don't actually voluntarily join unions. This is the huge fallacy, right? Um, all of the union membership in Australia is all caused by overarching factors. The nurses, it's generally a requirement for professional indemnity insurance. Teachers, um, if the teachers aren't in the union, they're going to be abandoned because the teachers' union effectively runs the education system. So that created about 100%. Coles Myers, Coles and Woolies and Domino's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, those groups. You try and get a job there without being a member of the shoppies union, right? And the reason the employers encourage is a very strong word. You don't sign the form, you don't get a job. The reason they do that is that they get a special deal from the shoppies union, which can't be matched by small businesses. So it's a mechanism to favour big business over small business. And so all of the areas, and you go in the public sector, people don't join because they think, oh, this is wonderful, I need someone to help me negotiate my terms and conditions. No, if you're not in the union, you're not going to get a promotion. It's that bloody simple, and it's part of a protection. So there is no, people don't, there's this myth that somehow or other, if unions get into the workplace, that somehow they will convince people to join unions. I can tell you, if Jesus Christ, he was a pretty good recruiter in his day, Bill, right? Proven recruiter. He was to make a comeback and wanted to go and work as a union delegate somewhere. He might get the numbers up to maybe, normally you expect to get about 5% that's the normal level of union membership when it's being encouraged. Someone like Jesus Christ, probably the world's greatest recruiter and salesperson, might get it up to 10 or 15%. That's it. Not going to get to 50, never going to get to 100. People, so there's this whole entire mythology of, union membership that people join us because they love us. Our members love us, but they come to us because in the industry, they have to join. So we become the choice within, if you like, the compulsion of the industry, if you sort of follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's, and this is not widely understood at all. My good friend Judith Sloan was saying, mentioned, where did you get that 5% from, Graeme? And I said, oh, geez, Judith. And it turns out, actually, a friend of mine, Queen's Counsel David Russell, said the level of union membership before it became before 1907 was around about 5-6%, right? Because there was in 1907, the Industrial Relations Act or something was called similar to that. And that gave a monopoly representation to the union. So workers could only be represented in negotiations with their employer by a registered union. That's it. 3 years later, the Fisher government were elected.
Oh, yeah, they've got a rhyme and a reason for it. But all that history speaks volumes in regards to the LNP to do something about it. And I mean, like I say, you've got a system. You've got a unicameral parliament. You've got a majority. You've got a short window to do things that people can see, benefit the whole system and get a few brownie points and a few runs on the board before you go to the next election. Because the thing, a lot of people think, well, the LNP is in, they got a 5.6 swing. Some seats are improved, but gee, there's still a lot of seats that are still in that marginal sort of area. I mean, if they don't deliver, right, people are not going to be very forgiving. And I'm not saying that they'll just automatically go back to the ALP straight away, they will be looking to cast their vote somewhere else, like the Libertarians or One Nation or even the Katters and things like that, before they go down to the major parties. But I think Queensland has a history of being, Labor far as the state elections go, and have been for a long time. I mean, they're the only state that had a communist member of parliament who had 2 terms from Bowen. So that's how sort of lefty they can be. So LNP, it's essential they get some runs on the board before the next election. If they don't, they won't be.
The two issues, one of the CFMEU and the hospital system, they don't fix them, they're stuffed. And the only way, just getting rid of the union monopoly is not going to fix the hospital system, but it will allow you to fix it. If you don't change that, you won't be allowed to make the changes to fix the system. That's the key to it. Having 2 or 3 or 20 nurse unions is not going to fix the health system, but it will enable you to do the other stuff easily without opposition to fix it. That's all. And it's the same with the construction industry. Providing competition to the CFMEU won't fix anything, but it enables you then to do the next step, which is get rid of the Master Builders Association mandate that everyone has to join the CFMEU, because there's alternatives around, so they can hardly say that. So that goes. So if you don't change to get rid of the union monopoly, then you can't do the other stuff. That's the hard point to get across. But I'm hopeful. The Minister, Jared Blay, he gets a bit enthusiastic at times, but he's got some courage, which is unique amongst politicians, and he's smart. He's smart. He's an intelligent man. He's starting to get his head around, the different narratives that are involved. It doesn't need a million people. It just needs someone that understands what the story is. It's not about the really difficult thing for them is to say, well, who's going to decide which union workers should join? Right? We're not politicians, so wouldn't the worker decide that?
Yeah.
Politicians don't think like that. They say, "Oh no, I should be deciding that." That's a bad one. That's a bad one. This is a good one. They've got to get out of that sort of philosophical body problem.
Well, the thing is, everyone knows Reagan's word. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Is the most dangerous words that I've ever spoken, sort of thing.
Oh.
So basically, all you've got to do is provide the legislation that provides the opportunity for things to change. You don't have to be, stipulate what exactly is going to happen, but you are just opening up the field. That's it. Yeah. You're just not restricting it anymore, but you're not making more rules on. It's got to be this union's got to do this, and this to the nth degree. You're just saying it's open for people to create new unions. So. But anyway, look, we've gone over the hour. So how are you proposing to get your message through to the LNP as you go forward, sort of thing? And also,
let me just qualify that. I think the Minister Blay's good. I think he gets it. But we've really got to get the message out to all of the other LNP politicians who don't understand it. They just a lot of them are terrified of the unions because they don't understand it, and they've heard all these dreadful things. That 300 or 400 people will turn up in the election before the next election and cold canvas, and they're terrified of that.
Well, they can
because
you allowed the unions to fund this, this action. And fund people to be in front of your office, you dumbass.
Oh, now is not the time, Premier. Now is not the time. In a perfect world, yes, but we need to set our priorities to get the Olympic bill done. Let's not upset the union movement at this stage. You all, Sir Humphrey, we've all heard the words, um, and people say it quite sincerely, and they believe it. When you want to believe something badly enough, that there really is a simple solution. We just have to be kind to the CFMEU, and they'll help us.
Okay then, Graham. Look, we'll leave it there.
Right, go to
Thanks very
sleep,
much
Bill.
for your time. If you can just stay on the line, I'll just introduce next week's show and
Okay.
just have a chat off air. Okay, if you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll be talking to Rebecca Dothwaite. Now, she's the publisher of New Mackay Life and Whitsunday Life, the local newspapers, and there's a whole series of newspapers, digital newspapers that also provide hard copies right around regional Queensland. We've got the Express in Mareeba. We've got Cairns Life as well. So they're starting to play a very integral part in regards to keeping the conversation and news going, and also providing a means for print adverts sort of thing that's dried up with the end of the hard copy papers, especially in Mackay and Rockhampton. It's only Townsville and Cairns that have got hard copies where people can become advertisers. So they're providing a great service. So we'll be talking to her about the risks in these startups and also the tribulations in regards to news gathering and getting it printed and having the distribution and also getting advertisers. So please join me next week for that. Thank you.